Hi guys. Last lesson we were talking about recruitment, training, and appraisal, and their meaning, why it's important for the business to have them, and how they maybe affect the business, how costly they are, how they motivate employees, and so on. And we left off in this on this slide where we said that we can consider all of these different processes as investments of HR management, of human resource management. There are costs. You have costs incurring because of recruitment, because of training, because of appraisal. But at the same time, because you're investing into your employees that are going to basically bring you profit in the long term, we can also consider them as investments. Today, we're going to have a look at a human resource management and have a look at it as the strategic approach to the effective management of the organization's workers, and how we have to look at this whole, all these functions as a way for the business to achieve their objectives and in a way to gain a competitive advantage. So when we're talking about human resource management, we aim obviously to recruit capable, flexible, committed people, to recruit the best employees for our business. Then we aim to develop their skills in order for them to benefit our organization the most. And then obviously we're also going to manage them and then reward their performance. When we are planning, when we're doing some HR planning, there are some terms that we might need to learn at this moment. What is the difference between HR or workforce planning? What is the difference between HR and workforce audit? And what is an HR or workforce plan? So when we're planning, we're basically thinking about what is the right number of people, what are the right skills that we need, and by skills we might mean skills, experience, maybe competences, and we need to plan to get the right number and the right number of people and with the right skills for our jobs at the right time and at the right cost. So in a way, we start with setting our objectives. We need to know what are the HR needs, what will be the HR needs, let's say, in, 6 months, in 1 year, in 2 years, in 5 years. Then we continue with creating a workforce audit. As you can see in the definition, is basically checking how skilled and qualified our existing employees are, and basically to what extent are our needs satisfied at the moment. And then the third step would be to construct a workforce plan. That is going to be, planning on how to satisfy the right numbers, how to satisfy the skills that we need. It is going to involve recruitment. It is going to involve our training process. But basically, this workforce plan is already going to, set the steps that we need in order to achieve our aims. So when we're talking about HR planning, the number of employees required will depend on different factors. Definitely the demand for the firm's product. If our product is demanded more, we're going to need to have more employees that will satisfy the demand, that will create the products. This can obviously be influenced by many external factors, market conditions, seasonal factors, the competitors' actions, and so on. Then it's also going to be affected by the productivity levels of staff. If we have less productive staff, we're probably going to need to have more of our employees. Also, the output per worker is forecast to increase as efficient machinery is bought, Obviously, we can cooperate with the other departments to increase the efficiency of the staff, not just by training them, but perhaps by giving them the right tools in form of efficient machinery, as we can see here. We're going to be affected also by the objectives of the business. So, for example, if we want to expand the business, we're probably going to need to increase, our customer service levels. Therefore, we're going to need to increase the employees working in customer service and so on. Also, changes in the law regarding workers' rights are going to affect the number of employees. So, for example, if there is a law that somehow limits the amount of hours per week that you can work, the maximum working week, or a law which affects the minimum wage level, this is also going to affect the number of employees that we need. If we have a short-term maximum working week, we're probably going to need to employ more employees. If we have our wages set on some minimum level, maybe it's going to decrease our number of employees. We're probably not going to be able to afford to pay as many. And the last one, labor turnover and absenteeism rate. What are those? We're probably going to have a look at the definition of those later on. But just very quickly, it's the rate at which staff leave a business or are absent from work. So labor turnover, what is the extent that we have people changing in our business? Absenteeism rate is the rate of people being absent from work. And obviously, if people are leaving more or are being more absent, we're probably going to need to require more employees so that they make up for the time that our sort of badly behaved employees did not spend on creating the product. When we're talking about the skills required in HR planning, the skills required will depend on, first of all, the pace of technological change in the industry. You can have a 1 minute or two to think by yourself how that is going to affect the skills. If the pace of technological change in the industry is fast, if technology is changing faster, will we require more skills or better skills or higher skills or maybe different skills from our employees? How is that going to affect? Think about it. So the answer is that the production methods and the complexity of the machinery used is probably going to, affect the skills required, in the sense that we're probably going to need more skilled workers or differently skilled workers. The need for flexible or multi-skilled staff, because workers perhaps need to be changing or rotating jobs. They need to be flexible. They need to have a lot of different skills, not just be over specialized. So we will probably need to train those that don't have the skills, or recruit people that are flexible, that are multi-skilled. The idea is that if you are multi-skilled, it will be much easier for the business to adapt to any changes, for example, when the demand conditions changed. And so this is why business should want to have multi-skilled staff. Also, most businesses need staff with more than one skill that can be applied in a variety of different ways. Again, as I said, this gives the firm some adaptability, greater, ability to change, or faster ability to change and be flexible. It gives the business a competitive advantage. So when we're talking about, HRM, or human resource management, we know that what are the aims of human resource management. We know, for example, what or how um, it's going to be affected by different external forces, also by the business itself. But how do we indicate whether, as a department, HR is successful or not? So for that purpose, we use some human resource management indicators that are somehow going to tell us how well are we doing. What happens if, at the beginning, we have a lot of investment into our workers? We're investing a lot into workers. Obviously, as a business, if you make an investment into your workers, you want to benefit from that investment for as long as possible. So if you spend time and money on, recruiting the best, the most skilled workers, then a lot of time on training them and compensating them and working with their talent, then obviously you're not going to want them to leave your business. And for that purpose, HRM, one of the HRM indicators is labor turnover. It measures the rate at which employees are leaving an organization. It is measured by number of employees leaving in 1 year divided by the average number of people employed times 100. Now, what do we want the labor turnover to be? Do we want it to be high or do we want it to be low? If labor turnover is high or increasing over time, then it might indicate some things. It's basically going to mean that more employees are leaving in that 1 year. And think about this previous slide. Remember, we are investing into those employees. We don't want them to leave. So the higher the labor turnover, the actually worse for the business. And it might indicate some problems that the business is facing. It might indicate employee discontent. For some reason, even if we invested in them, they're not happy. Maybe it's because of our organizational culture. Maybe it's because we are not doing such a great job motivating them, leading them, and so on. So it's all very connected to the other human resource chapters that we're going to cover in the next few weeks. It might be, low morale. By morale, it's like the general motivation of the staff. Possibly a recruitment policy that leads to the wrong people being employed. That is also possible. If we're, recruiting the wrong people for the job, they're maybe not motivated by the job itself, they're not going to want to stay at the company. They're going to leave, maybe for a better, more interesting job. So these, the reason why we measure labor turnover is to see how we're doing over time, how maybe certain policies in HR that we set in place, how they're affecting our results. Areas of low unemployment are likely to experience high labor turnover or low labor turnover. So if we have low unemployment, so the areas of low unemployment are likely to experience high labor turnover. Why is that? So unemployment means what? That people are not employed, and low unemployment is generally good for us. Then why does, why in areas, in some regions of low unemployment, why do we experience high labor turnover? It's because there may be many better paid and more attractive jobs available in the local area. Suddenly, it's the when there's low unemployment, it's the employees that choose the job, not necessarily the other way around. So there is higher demand for the employees uh, than there is the supply of employees. So it's actually the employees that are sort of choosing the job, not necessarily the other way around. So when there is low unemployment, it can be said that uh, you know there is higher labor turnover because people can choose. They can be picky, let's say. So you will just leave your job for a better paid job, more attractive job, and obviously, those businesses are going to compete with each other for those better workers. So they're going to, offer great benefits, offer flexible hours, things that people want. Also, different industries can have different labor turnover rates. So, what about fast food restaurants? Do you think in fast food restaurants we're going to have people changing very often, or people staying there for longer periods of time as workers? We will have high labor turnover. Usually, we'll have just students working for very low wages. It's a hard job. Um, if you're going to be offered a better job, then probably you're going to take it. What about law practices or scientific research? What do you think the labor turnover is going to be in these practices? Do you think a lawyer is or scientist is likely to leave for a better, more attractive, better paid job? Probably not, unless it's in the same industry, maybe just a competitor. But in general, there in such industries, the labor turnover will be lower, relatively lower. So labor turnover is one indicator, and note down in your notes how we calculate it, and how we should look at it. Like, note down what it indicates about the business. There are obviously benefits and drawbacks to reading this indicator. First of all, a labor turnover shows us like the cost of recruiting, selecting, and training new staff. Um, if we have higher labor turnover, then the cost will be higher. It will mean, that it's more difficult to establish loyalty, or have regular contact with customers. It will be more difficult to establish team spirit and stable work groups. On the other hand, low skilled and less productive staff might be leaving. So they could be replaced with more carefully selected workers. That is the benefit of having higher labor turnover. Obviously, if we are going to have new workers coming in, then these workers might bring new ideas, new practices into the organization. So in a way, labor turnover in some cases can work for you, it can be a benefit for the business. A business that plans to reduce staff numbers anyway, due to, for example, rationalization, will find that high labor turnover will do his job, as leaving staff will not be replaced. So labor turnover as an indicator is usually useful. There can be some benefits to labor turnover and also some drawbacks to labor turnover as such. So what would be the external factors that influence HR planning? Definitely the demographic change. If we have natural population growth, net migration, aging population, this is all going to affect our HR planning. Then we also need to look at changes in labor mobility. How flexible are employees to move to another region in order to get a job? How flexible are they to change their job? For example, let's say a teacher becoming a lawyer, or the other way around. Like, how flexible are people changing their specialization, their profession? And new communication technologies are also going to influence HR planning. So these are all things that are definitely like happening at this moment in the world, in the business world, and HR departments need to somehow take that into account and plan with these, or taking these external factors into consideration. So here are some examples of demographic changes. So natural population growth, the fact that birth rate exceeds death rate, can that be an opportunity for the business? What would be, on the other hand, a constraint for the business of this particular demographic change? What about net migration? Immigration compared with emigration. So if more people are migrating into our country, how could that be an opportunity? How could that be a constraint? Or what about aging population? Are there any opportunities and constraints to this demographic change? I suggest you pause for like 5 minutes. Think about these particular demographic changes. Try to put yourself into the shoes of an HR manager that will somehow have to plan with these external factors in mind. And when you're done, we can move on. Okay, so you can pause the video, finish your exercise, and we're going to move on to the next slide. Here's some of the answers. Now, changes in labor mobility. This is one of the external factors that also affects HR planning. Occupational mobility helps a country achieve economic efficiency. Why? You know, occupational mobility is the extent to which workers are willing or able to move to different jobs requiring different skills. So if we have a very flexible workforce, it will actually help us become more efficient, because if we need more workers in one area, no problem, our workers will switch jobs straight away. If we need like workers suddenly in a different industry or in a different occupation, again, a flexible workforce will change straight away. And this is why it helps achieve economic efficiency. So it can happen for a lot of reasons. Maybe sometimes jobs become let's say, I don't want to say obsolete, but maybe not needed anymore in one industry. One industry can become obsolete. So workers will have to find new jobs. There can be structural unemployment being low. It might be good to know or have a look. What is structural unemployment? What is frictional unemployment? What is cyclical unemployment? So cyclical unemployment is unemployment happening due to a recession, and when we have an economic, let's say, downturn, when our economy is at a low point, maybe also in a crisis. That is unemployment happening because of the cycle, the trade cycle, or the business cycle. There can be frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment is most of the time just short-term unemployment happening when people are switching jobs. So maybe I leave my old job and it takes 3 or 6 months to actually find a new job. This would be called frictional unemployment. Structural unemployment is actually the sort of hardest to get rid of. It's happening because one industry, becoming obsolete, people having to requalify and find new jobs. So if our workers in general are flexible, they have occupational mobility, our structural unemployment as a government is going to be low. This will help us achieve economic efficiency. So, developed countries will probably differ from emerging market economies, uh, and this will affect, in some ways, our labor mobility. So, let's have a look. If in developed countries, we have relatively immobile workforce, why is it, why are people in developed countries not so happy to move for their job? It can happen because of home ownership. So we have a lot of homeowners. Home ownership is high. Skill levels in one occupation are high. And therefore, because we own, for example, a flat or an apartment in one region, and we are very skilled in a particular job, we're not so mobile to move to a different city and maybe to find a different job in a totally different industry. So this is just one example. If you're going to be in HR, looking or somehow planning for different types of countries, economic, when it comes to the economic development, developed countries are going to have relatively immobile workers, while emerging market economies have a different situation. There, usually home ownership is low, skill levels in one occupation are low because people are maybe not so educated. Family or ethnic ties to one area could be higher, but in general, our workforce is going to be relatively mobile. Yeah. So there we can maybe, encourage our workers to move to our region where our factories, because our benefits are going to be sort of important enough for them to change their job or their home. Geographical mobility is also important. I kind of mentioned it, basically being flexible enough to move to a different geographic region to take up new jobs. Geographical mobility tends to be from rural into urban areas. Yes, it tends to be high from rural into urban areas. So people are more likely to move from rural areas into urban areas for different reasons. But this, on the other hand, can lead to overcrowding and very poor living conditions in towns and cities. So, like, geographical mobility can be sort of a very risky factor for the whole economy as well, if it leads to some of these disadvantages of urbanization. How to increase labor mobility? So think about what somehow motivates people to move. Usually governments use some kind of incentives. You can either have relocation grants, you can have different job centers or offices that advertise job vacancies nationally. So basically informing, my unemployed workers what are the different opportunities, so that they're informed, so that they can apply for the job. And last thing that the governments often do is that they create some training or retraining programs for the unemployed, and they basically even pay for your education, so that, for example, person that finished in one industry can retrain themselves and become or get a different profession, become employed in a different industry. Another thing that is going to impact our department, HR, are going to be new communication technologies. So here, it's going to definitely impact numbers of workers needed. Well, how do you think that's going to impact it? If we have a lot of technologies, a lot of machines maybe doing our job, more sophisticated technologies, are we going to need more workers or less workers? Try to answer that question yourself. I hope you know the answer. Then also it's going to impact the skills of workers needed. So again, if we have new technologies, we're probably going to need more skilled workers in order to use those technologies. So it's going to have the impact on the skills of workers needed. Some jobs lost, some created, and very often we'll have flexible and ICT trained employees. So that's the answers. Now, it's also going to have an effect on the change in the working life. So, as we saw, mainly in COVID, people were starting to use remote offices, starting to work from their home office. This is all possible thanks to technologies. There's no need to share location anymore, for example, right? And the last one, there are very new, more efficient ways of producing products, from hardware to software that we can use in order to produce products. That is also going to affect HR. Very often you're going to need fewer workers, and the computers will do a lot of the routine manual tasks that used to be done by workers. As an effect of that, we will probably need to have a higher demand, or there will be higher demand for creative jobs, maybe university qualifications, because if you're creative, then the technologies are probably going to be less likely to replace you. So the last thing that we're going to have a look at, which is part of this chapter, is employment practices. So we know that at the beginning, when we have an employee, we need to sign a contract of employment with them, which is a legal document that sets out the terms and conditions governing a worker's job. Now, if the worker is a good worker, he's doing his job, he's succeeding and achieving his goals that we set for him, or his department, then we can promote him, we can praise him, we can, at a performance appraisal, perhaps give him a bonus and things like that. So this is the positive way, this is the positive sort of result of this cooperation with this particular employee. Or it can happen that the employee is not performing how we have agreed on, and this can then lead to dismissal. Dismissal is defined as being removed or sacked from a job due to incompetence or breach of discipline. So why we have it here? It's important to know the difference between some of these terms. The contract is setting out all your responsibilities, or should be setting out all your responsibilities. And if you somehow breach your contract, then obviously the contract also sets the terms and the way how you can be dismissed as a worker, or from the point of view of the business, how the business can dismiss, or under which condition the business can dismiss the worker. Unfair dismissal is also a term. This sometimes can happen also, but that's when you are ending a worker's employment contract for a reason that the law regards as being unfair. For example, due to discrimination, or you cannot just fire or dismiss, as you can that would be the correct term, that you cannot dismiss someone just because you don't like them. You have to have real reasons. So, unfair dismissal, it's important to know that as a business owner, you don't have the right, let's say, to dismiss just anyone. They really need to do something wrong. They need to breach the discipline or somehow be incompetent in their job for you to be able to dismiss them. Yeah, make sure that you are not being unfair, because that in such case the employee could sue you for unfair dismissal. Now, another term that you might come across is the word redundancy. Redundancy is when a job is no longer required, so the employee doing this job becomes redundant through no fault of his or her own. It is not the same as dismissal. That is super important to say. It is not the same as dismissal. Dismissal, as we saw in the previous slide, happens when the employee breaches a contract. But redundancy happens very often during some kind of recession, when a particular business is fighting for survival. They are letting people go. They're making them redundant, and there's happening not because the workers are somehow bad at their job. It's happening because these jobs are no longer required, and keeping these people in their posts, in their jobs, could make that particular business bankrupt. They need to, sometimes businesses need to cut their costs. They need to streamline their operations. When there are budget cuts needed, when there's change in technology, when there's a fall in demand, then you can make certain jobs and certain people redundant. If you don't do this very unpopular step, if you don't make this big decision and cut the workers' jobs, then obviously it can result in even worse consequences. There can be further redundancies later on. For example, in order to still save the business, or it can actually lead to the failure of the entire business. So it will definitely be a very unpopular decision, but a very important one. Businesses don't make their employees redundant just for no reason. They usually have to have, and it should be the last resort. And it will explain also in the next slide why it should be the last resort, what effect it has on the rest of the employees or on their motivation. But if it is already happening, it probably needs to be done. And it's the lesser of the two evils, because if you don't make such a decision now, if workers aren't made redundant now, it can result in further redundancies or failure of the entire business. Why it's such an unpopular move is because of the effect that it has on other employees. So here, just imagine a group of employees. Let's say you have 8 employees. For some reason, you need to make 3 out of the 8 redundant. You have budget cuts. You're letting them go. Now, what do you think happens to the rest of the employees? They know that their colleagues, friends have been made redundant. What happens to the rest? How does that affect, their morale or the staff morale or their motivation? What do you think? Well, it is definitely going to have serious effect on the staff who remain. So the loss of job security is actually, as we're going to see later on when we talk about motivational theories, it's one of the most important needs in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you lose as a person, you lose your job security, you will most definitely lose a huge part of your motivation. Um, and this will affect or can affect your productivity. Even if you yourself were the lucky one that stayed in the business, you will have this, or it will have this effect on you. So it will have the effect on the staff who remain. They'll lose motivation and they may become less productive. So it is very important that we use this really as the last resort.